The rains that year were heavy, but the forest did not drown. Instead, it grew thicker, wilder, almost alive. And deep within it, where no road reached and no king dared enter, something ancient was stirring. The women were no longer hiding. Across the region, from quiet villages to great marketplaces, strange stories were told in hushed tones. They spoke of young girls who walked through fire and did not burn, of women who touched poisoned water and turned it sweet, of voices in dreams saying, "You are not alone. You are one of us." These women had no army, no flags, no drums. But they had scars. They had rage. And most of all, they had memory. They were called the daughters of Adoma. Not because they were born of her blood, but because they carried her pain like a sacred necklace around their throats. It began with quiet resistance. A nobleman beat his maid. That night, his crops withered in his fields. A chief arranged a marriage between his 12-year-old niece and a merchant. Before the wedding, the merchant fell into a trance. He tore off his clothes, ran into the forest, and was never seen again. It was as if the spirit of justice itself had risen, not with shouts, but with silence sharp as glass. The kings grew afraid. They called it a curse. But the women called it balance. They began meeting in secret. By moonlight in banana groves. By firelight in dried-up wells. They shared names that were stripped from them. They spoke of shame as a weapon, and how to take it back. No one knew who led them. There were whispers of a masked woman who never showed her face, but whose voice could make even the proudest warrior bow his head. Some said it was Adoma herself, returned from the forest. Others believed it was her daughter, or her vessel. Whatever the truth, her message was always the same. You are not small. You are not soft. You are thunder clothed in silence. At first, the men laughed. They said women could not bring down kingdoms. But then, the disappearances began. One by one, the worst of them began vanishing. A slave raider turned up dead in a dry river, his eyes missing. A royal advisor known for his cruelty was found tied to a tree, still breathing, but unable to speak. A general who led raids on rebel camps was found in his home, whispering a single word. Forgive. Panic spread like wild bees through the courts of kings. Who were these women? Where did they strike from? Why did no sword, no guard, no threat stop them? Because they were not fighting with spears. They were fighting with truth. And truth, once awakened, cannot be buried. A rebellion began, not on battlefields, but in the hearts of young girls. 10-year-olds who told their uncles, no. Teenagers who ran from arranged marriages and were never seen again. Mothers who whispered ancient songs over the wounds of their daughters and blessed their footsteps toward the forest. It was not one war. It was 1,000 small fires. The king sent spies. The spies returned shaking, useless. Some went mad. One gouged out his own eyes and said, "She showed me everything. I will never forget." The oldest oracle in the land was summoned to explain. She said nothing at first. Then she pointed to the soil beneath their feet and whispered. "This land remembers its daughters. You built thrones on their backs. Now they rise, not to ask, but to take." Soon, the rebellion had a name, the fire beneath the ground. The rulers tried everything. They burned villages. They cursed trees. They banned gatherings of women. But it was too late. Because the daughters had already infiltrated every court, every clan, every kitchen and marketplace. They were not strangers from afar. They were sisters, wives, aunties, and friends. They were teachers, dancers, nurses, and market women. They looked like everyone, but inside, they carried the storm. And their leader? She remained unseen. But one day, in the ruins of the old Ahankara palace, a message was found, freshly carved into stone, though no hand had been seen writing it. It said, "We are the daughters you buried beneath gold. We are the slaves who braided resistance into our hair. We are not gone. We are gathering." Adoma remembers. The kings now sleep with guards at their doors. They do not trust their own daughters. They do not walk near the forest's edge. Because sometimes, in the stillness of night, they hear humming. A soft tune. An old lullaby. But it carries the weight of thunder. And they know. The storm is not over. The wind no longer whispered. It roared. By the time the kings realized what was coming, it was already too late. The whispers had become voices. The voices had become chants. And the chants had become drums. Real drums. Loud. Angry. Echoing across hills, forests, rivers, and thrones. What began as scattered embers beneath the soil had erupted into fire. Not just in one kingdom. Not just in one palace. But across the land, from the rivers of the south to the mountains in the north. The daughters of Adoma were no longer hiding in forests. They were walking openly through cities. Preaching. Teaching. Organizing. Some were healers. Others were warriors. And others still, perhaps the most dangerous, were mothers raising children who would never bow. But one question remained, burning in the hearts of enemies and followers alike. Was Adoma still alive? Some said yes. Others insisted she had become spirit, not alive, but not gone. A few believed she had simply walked into the forest, leaving the rest to finish what she started. Still, her presence was everywhere. Her name was painted on trees. Sewn into wrappers. Carved into the backs of stools in royal courts, where no hand was ever seen doing the carving. Wherever injustice rose, her daughters were there. Quiet first, but unshakable. And then came the breaking point. A brutal king in the east, King Dramo, known for his thirst for conquest and disdain for women, announced he would burn the forest of the forgotten. He declared Adoma a myth. A bush girl's tale. He laughed at the daughters. He called them weak wombs with loud mouths. And so, he gathered his army, 300 men strong, and marched toward the edge of the sacred forest. They never returned. Not one. A week later, their shields and swords were found lying in a perfect circle, at the base of the baobab tree where the old Ahenkara palace once stood. In the center was a single white wrapper, stained with red clay. That was the day the people stopped calling them daughters. They began calling them the wind. Because you could not see them coming. But once they arrived, nothing stood still. Across the continent, the world was shifting. Colonial powers were tightening their grip. Foreign guns, foreign laws, foreign gods, all were flooding in. But beneath it all, the ground trembled, not from warships, but from memory. Memory carried by women whose grandmothers had been bought and sold like cattle. Women who would not let their daughters wear chains. And then, one day, the vision came. In villages from the coast to the savannah, hundreds of women saw the same dream on the same night. A woman in white, her feet not touching the ground. She was not young, but not old. Her face was veiled. Her hands were empty. And her voice was thunder. "I did not rise for revenge," she said. "I rose so you would never again kneel. My body broke. But my story stood. You are that story." The next day, thousands of women gathered at the ruins of the old palace. They sang no songs. They raised no fists. They simply stood, in silence. That silence echoed louder than any war drum. And for the first time in memory, the king stayed home. They sent no guards. No arrows. No threats. Because they knew, the war was not against a person. It was against time itself. And time remembers what pain forgets. The daughters of Adoma began to teach their own history. In hidden classrooms. On porches. Under moonlight. They wrote stories with charcoal on stone, stitched them into cloth, braided them into their children's hair. And they told the children. We are not slaves. We are the storm that broke the chains. Years passed. Empires fell. Flags changed. But the story, the spirit, never died. Some say Adoma still walks among us. That she is the market woman who stares too deeply into your soul. The grandmother whose gaze makes you sit straighter. The girl on the street who smiles like she knows something you don't. Because Adoma was never meant to be a name. She was meant to be a mirror, held up to a world that forgot how to listen. Today, her name does not appear in schoolbooks. No statue honors her. No holiday bears her face. But in places where justice trembles, where silence screams, you will find her. In the refusal of a girl to be sold. In the eyes of a boy who chooses peace. In the footsteps of women who no longer apologize for surviving. Adoma is not dead. Because truth does not die. It waits. It whispers. It becomes you. You beat the girl, but not her name. You caged the body, not the spirit. She is not forgotten. She is the forest. She is the flame. She is the wind.